this is a posture that I've practiced a lot, like for decades in my life. And so I feel comfortable in it. And it doesn't make my back hurt, but I'm also sitting up on a cushion. So my hips are higher than my knees. It helps my pelvis. Like I can rock my pelvis easily forward and back in the seat. My spine feels like it can move. Sometimes people just sitting on the ground, like in cross legs, if it makes your pelvis tip back, then it can really lock up your back body. So if you're going to join me for a seat, then I would like to ask that you sit in a way that allows your pelvis to move and allows all the natural curves in your spine to be present. And if you're seated on the floor, this might mean that you want to sit on a cushion or a folded blanket. Sitting on chairs is great. Lying down is great. Lying down can make it challenging to stay awake though. So if you lie down, I would definitely offer that keeping your eyes open can be helpful for staying present. And I also want to say that if you fall asleep because the sound of my voice in this practice is allowing you to rest, I take that as a compliment and it's not a failure. Okay. Like a lot of times people are like, I try and listen to your meditations, but I always fall asleep. And I'm like, fabulous. If I can hold you in your dream space and your sleep space, that's like a gift. You know, we are deeply in need of rest in our world right now. So if you fall asleep, you fall asleep. All right. So before we begin, let's just take a moment. Everybody tune in kind of with yourself. How do you feel right now? Just kind of notice. Tune in with your bodily sensations. Notice where there's weight in your body. Notice where there's push and pull. Notice how your eyes feel and how your jaw feels and how your head feels. Notice how your inner body and your belly feel. And then let's get really interested in the screen for a second and just join me. There's a few of us that have our videos on. So let's get really curious about each other just for a minute. And if people have their videos on, try and see in their rooms. Like, where are these people? Some people have blurry backgrounds. Ooh, what's behind the blur? Right? Some people's videos are not on. Who are they? Imagine, right? Like it's like that they're human beings on the other side of this screen. Move around a little bit like, whoa, there's humans. Okay, okay. And then go ahead and orient to your own space and look around. See where you are. See the three-dimensionality of things. Notice the depth of space, the space of space, the shapes of space. Okay. And then let's actually come back to the screen. And now as you kind of gaze at your peers and your colleagues, this cohort, this momentary coming together, right? This group of people will never come together in this way again. Can you let your felt sense register the space inside of people's little squares? Just a moment ago, we were looking with our eyes, right? All of us, our heads were pulled forward. We're noticing light, we're noticing image. The light and the image don't really change now. We're still looking at a screen, but can you feel in your body that there's space behind the screen? Three-dimensional embodied space. Oh, and if you see people's heads, right, people's shoulders, can you see them breathing and shifting and moving as you breathe and shift and move? And then notice your mind. Notice your felt sense. Notice what happens in your consciousness with a reminder, right, of space and livingness. Then you're welcome to keep your video on. You're also totally welcome to keep it off if that helps you go into your own experience. I'm just going to spotlight for myself now. So now go ahead and bring your attention to your own body. Look at your body. If the sense of sight is not easily accessible or preferred, then tune in with the inner sense, your own body shape. As you regard your body, greet your body. Hello, body. Get curious about the space between the mind and the way that the mind communicates and the body. We're going to use our minds to greet our bodies, to notice our bodies. And then see your hands and start to look at your hands. Now, astrologically in medical astrology, Gemini rules the hands. And so as you look at your hands, get really curious about your hands. Curiosity is a Gemini keyword. And let's just take a moment to appreciate these really incredible tools that we have, these instruments of exploration, and feel the variability in your hands, right? So many joints in the hands, these opposable thumbs. Okay, variability, change, possibility. These are the keys for Gemini. And then your hands can touch, right? So use your hands now to touch your body a little bit, or you might touch your environment. And as you touch, register that touch is a key pathway for information to flow through. So we use touch to get information about shape and temperature and size and quality, energy. But also touch can bring the world closer to us, and you might see something and reach for it and pick it up, or see that your hands can kind of guide you through space. And often our hands do guide us through space. We're reaching and looking at the same time. So kind of just feel that for a moment, feel the relationship between your hands and your eyes. Gemini speaks to the cognitive perceptive pathways of exchange. How is information shared and received and given? Now let's use our hands to really kind of wake up our bodies for a second. And I want to propose some skin touch. And I'm just going to touch myself. I'm going to touch my face and my scalp. And I want to feel the skin on my body, kind of patting, stroking, waking up my skin all the way around my body, touching down wherever it's easy and comfortable to touch. You can move your limbs. Just going to wake up the skin. So our skin, of course, is innervated by our nerves, our nervous system. So much information coming in. This is what Gemini loves, is information, sensory information. Let's change this information a little bit. Scratching, using your fingernails to scratch at the skin. Whew. Okay, and as you feel this scratching or waking up the skin, kind of notice what happens in the rest of your body, your energy. And then let's try a little bit of slapping. And so I'm going to make a little gentle kind of cup with my palm and just kind of clap down. Definitely both arms around my armpit and shoulder, up my palm. Okay, let's get over the ribs and the collarbone. This is all Gemini terrain. Hands, wrists, elbows, make sure to get both arms, shoulders, collarbones. The ribs as an apparatus have multiple rulers, but the air in the lungs belongs to Gemini. So as you flap and slap and scratch, okay, breathe. Whew. Okay, and then let's take a moment and tune in. And notice your energy and notice your mind. That kind of skin touch and sensation can wake us up sometimes. And it's one way to help energize if we're feeling a little bit more sleepy or dense, that kind of touch. It can open up the sympathetic nervous system. It can also be very activating for the nervous system, sometimes a little too activating for some. And so if you feel overstimulated right now, if you're like, wow, I'm kind of buzzy, yeah, you can also take your hands and give yourself more grounding touch. And this is kind of squeezing into the muscles. Yeah, giving more of a dense, pressurized touch. And you might find that you might try that even if you don't feel overstimulated. Notice the different quality of that kind of touch. Sometimes this is helpful with little kids, and we're all little kids still sometimes. Yeah, little kids that are overstimulated. Yeah, the world has become, whoa, a lot of information. So, whoa, holding, containing, telling them that they can do that too, right? Can be very grounding for the nervous system. Okay, so now we're going to get ready to breathe. We're breathing all the time, but intentional breathing practices we can set up with intention. So I'm sitting on a meditation cushion. This allows my pelvis to be higher than my knees. It means that my pelvis can easily rock. Yeah, I can move it around. My spine is pretty free to move. So find your seat, okay, and remember that you can move. There's no benefit in creating suffering for yourself by keeping yourself stuck. Right? You can move. If it helps you to tune inwards now, let your eyes close if that feels comfortable. And again, if you start to feel sleepy, then the eyes open a little bit can help you stay awake. But if your eyes are open, then try and let your eyeballs relax. Okay, so you're taking in information through the peripheral vision, as well as through whatever is directly in front of you. But your eyes don't need to reach for anything. Whatever is flowing in through the eyes can just flow in. We're not going to do anything to our breath right now. We just want to notice it. And so in the next couple of breaths, watch your own breath. No need to change it. And every breath is different, so every breath will change on its own. The power of noticing is also the power of change. And notice where your breath begins. When and how do you feel called into your body? Notice how your breath moves into your body. Where does it go? We can breathe into the upper portion of the lungs and the lower portion, into the front, into the back. And we've got two lungs, and the left and the right lung are slightly different sizes. Okay, so notice where you feel your breath and where you feel it moving. And then I want to invite you to begin to notice where your breath already feels easy. So where there's already ease in the breath. And let your attention remain there. And that doesn't mean your breath has to remain there. So your breath will move and spread out. But wherever you feel ease, a sense of ease in the breath, really let your mind rest in that ease of breath. And I'll give an example of what I mean here. And so for myself, I feel that it's very easy in my body, easeful in my breath, kind of right at the base of my throat, the top of my lungs. That blossoming of breath feels easy. As I feel my breath go lower into my belly and lower ribs, I feel more forcefulness in my breath. It feels a little harder to breathe. So I'm going to let my attention reside now in the top of my lungs where the ease is. And I want to invite this ease to inform the space around it. What would happen if I imagined and invited? So oftentimes invitation begins in the sense of possibility, right? Maybe this sense of ease that I feel, the top of my lungs can spread towards my lower lungs. And it's just an invitation. It's not a rule, it's not a requirement. So we'll spend about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, just with this practice. It's the practice of translating ease. Noticing where there's ease in your breath. Inviting that sensation, that awareness now to spread into other spaces in your lungs, into other locations of your breath. And as we do this, can you notice how your breath is always changing? Every breath is different. And the breath itself is a movement of change. And notice how your tissues, your bodily tissues, change as you breathe. And when our breath is soft and relaxed and easeful, the tissues around that breath, the tissues responding to that breath, become more soft and relaxed and easeful. When there's force in the breath, when the breath itself is tense, then our tissues become tense, more rigid. Sometimes that tension even translates as pain. And you may have felt this in yourself or at various times, that sometimes trying to take a deep breath, really forcing the lungs to open, can produce a kind of muscular tension. And if you already have tight pathways, sometimes that tension can create an ache or maybe even a sharp pain. So we want to invite ease into the breath and ease into the surrounding tissues. And there's no goal here for how big the breath becomes. Okay, a short breath or a small breath is not worse than a big breath or a long breath, okay? So we're not comparing qualitatively. We're comparing for sensation and texture. How does one breath feel? How does the next breath feel? Sending our curiosity into the spaces where it feels easy, but then letting that curiosity continue to spread. There are places in your body where it's harder to breathe, where it feels that the breath requires force to reach. Can you meet those places with a little bit of imagination, with curiosity, with a question? Is it possible? Is it possible that these places too can know ease? Now we'll begin to intentionally attune the mind with the breath even more. And the way that we'll do this is by noticing the length of our inhales and exhales. Now, again, without forcing anything, just breathing naturally. I invite you to start to count your breath length. So whatever your pacing is, you might be a fast or a slow counter. Notice how long it takes to inhale and how long it takes to exhale. We're not imposing any length of time. We're just curious. And every breath is different. So the length may be different every time. We'll take several breaths like this, just counting at your own pace, not imposing any length. but counting the length of the inhalation and the exhalation. When your mind wanders and you start to think about something else, just notice that your mind has wandered. It's totally fine and completely normal if it does. Then try and come back to this rhythm of counting your breath and noticing the potential for relaxation and ease. So now we'll try something, which is to intentionally lengthen the breath. And whatever the longest part of your breath is, for some of you, it will be the inhalation. For others, it will be the exhalation. The invitation is now to match the other half of your breath. So I have a longer exhalation, and I found myself exhaling for about 8, while my inhales were about 5. So now I'm going to try in my own body to lengthen my inhalation so that I would inhale for 8 and exhale for 8, matching my breath, my equal parts, inhale and exhale. So please do this yourself. And if your breath was changing quite a bit, then you can just choose a count. It can even be arbitrary. And you can change it as you go. So if you feel like, oh, you really need more or less time, then let it adjust. And as you breathe, continue to come back to this sense of ease in the breath. So we really don't want to force the breath. We don't want to introduce strain or tension into the body with the breath. And if that means that one half of the breath needs to be longer or shorter, that is okay. We're just trying things out. And you really have to use your mind here. And there's mind training that we're doing right now with counting the breath. Using your mind to know your breath, to build intimacy with your breath. Strengthening the pathway between mind and breath, which is also strengthening the pathway between mind and body as you explore this quality of ease. And when your mind wanders, and that's not an if, it's a when you start to think about other things, when you lose track of your counting, notice, I'm thinking, lost track. And then use your mind to bring your mind back to this moment, this breath, this count. We'll practice for a few minutes like that. We'll continue breathing for another several minutes. And now there's an invitation to continue doing exactly what you've been doing, counting your breath, matching the length of the inhale and the exhale, inviting ease into your tissues by noticing ease in the breath, letting that spread, working with your mind. Just continuing to very gently bring the mind back to the breath, bring the mind back to the moment. And if you would like to add one more ingredient, this is the ingredient of pause, the ingredient of retain, pause and hold. And at the very top of your in-breath or the very bottom of your out-breath, explore pause and hold. Pausing with all the breath held in, pausing at the emptiness of the exhale. And let this moment of pause be a moment that expands over time. Okay, so the first couple of rounds of breath, you might just pause just for 1 second. Maybe not even a second, just a beat. Noticing the transition space between full and empty, empty and full. And then only as it feels easeful in the body. So again, we don't want to introduce tension by forcing with the mind upon the breath. We continue to cultivate ease by letting the body inform the mind, right? The body says, this feels relaxed, and the mind observes, those are the qualities of relaxation. Then the mind can lead the body. Then the mind can invite, hey body, these are the qualities of relaxation. Can we bring this to this other place? So maintaining that sense of easefulness, that curiosity around where is ease, lingering in the pause, holding those moments of exhale and inhale. You might also bring your counting into the pause. Once you get the rhythm of it, once it feels more natural in your body, or you have a sense of what feels easeful for you in terms of length, you might start to count the space of the pause. And some breath teachers will say, start with half the time. So if you inhale and exhale for a count of 8, then pause for a count of 4. And just see how that is. And if you want to elongate the pause after a few rounds, then do. But our practice here is honesty, right? Honesty within the ease and the tension. And as we practice, our capacity naturally grows. And I also want to say that growth of capacity doesn't happen in a straight line. And it will go through peaks and valleys, dips and swells. So if you practice like this for several minutes or for several years, you'll find that you can retain your breath longer and longer and longer. You'll find that the length of time that you inhale and exhale also starts to expand. And right now we are where we are. We are with the breath that's arising right now, with the pause that we're lingering in right now. And whatever length it is the length that it is. No judgment. So we'll practice for another 3 minutes or so, watching the breath, counting the breath, equalizing the breath, retaining and pausing with the breath. You breathe at the length, you pause for the length that is easeful in your body. You track sensations of ease as they flow in and out with the breath. You work with your mind. You notice when the mind slips away and you gently call it back. For 3 minutes. Just one more minute. Inviting the mind to stay with the breath. And after your next exhalation, allow your breath to return just to its natural flow. You can stop counting. And just notice. Notice the quality of your mind now. Notice the feeling inside your body. Can you recall to an hour ago how you felt at the beginning of our time together? And notice now how you feel different. Something has changed. Noticing change in the body. Noticing change in the mind. Noticing that your beingness is dynamic and changing. You've changed in the last hour. Imagine how much you change in a day.